everyone, happy Thursday. Welcome to So What, the Marketing Analytics and Insights live show. It looks like StreamYard has changed some of their settings, so we will have to fix that on a future episode because that blue is new. And clearly it's distracting me now. Chris, John, welcome. Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday.
Let me get back on track. Oh, then there was the high five. Last week, we started what was the first of a 3-part series, SEO for AI. So last week, we covered more of the technical aspects of optimizing your content for AI because generative AI is not a traditional search engine, but you can appear in the results when you query generative AI. And so it's getting lumped under search engine traffic, organic traffic. And so we're talking about the SEO of it. So this week in part 2, we're talking about how to optimize content for AI. And if you missed it, there is a cheat sheet, a checklist in our free Slack group, Analytics for Marketers. You can go to trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers to get the checklist of the 3 different parts of SEO for AI and what you need to do to optimize your content. So, Chris, where should we start this week?
This week, we should start with talking through a bit of things like the video first transmedia content framework, which one of these days I'm going to come up with a better, more catchy name than that, because that's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful. And we talked about this on our podcast earlier this week. And again, quick plug, trustinsights.ai/GI podcast, where we were talking about how there could be a AI version. But do you want to walk through the framework as it is?
So the original framework, this framework, believe it or not, began in 2008. Our former agency owner, when we worked at the PR agency, Todd Deffrin, came up with this back in 2008. It was back then it was called the Content Atomization Framework. And the idea was take big content, turn to little content. Sure. The same thing is generally true here. However, we've said since the beginning of Trust Insights back in 2018 that you want to start with video first, because video contains the most information of any content format. So if you are a marketer and you don't have time to make unique content for every possible channel, if you start with video, you can then break that up and transform it into different formats. So you can take a full video and turn it into video clips. Our account manager, Kelsey, does this with our shows and our podcasts, and you'll see those shorts on YouTube and Instagram and stuff like that. You can remove the audio from a video and turn that into a podcast. That can become an audio podcast of its own. You can then take that audio, use the AI tool of your choice, and turn it into a transcript. And that can then be used in blogs or newsletters or ebooks and so on and so forth. You can take still images from a video and turn those into images you can post on places like Instagram, Pinterest, etc. You can also, of course, incorporate those into longer form static works. You can take the video course and put it up as is in places like YouTube or Vimeo and so on and so forth. If you are, if you have a platform, like Twitch, it can be hosted there. And then if those things do well, you can turn them into webinars and then to proposals for conference sessions and, potentially be on stage with a show that really resonated with people. I've had this happen relatively recently. The post I did on optimizing content for SEO, for AI, which was in my own personal newsletter, has become this series. So it's taking one thing and turning it into another. So that was the status for the last 5 years. What's changed is instead of having to start with video, you can start anywhere in this. So instead of it being a framework from beginning to end, left to right, it can almost be like a cycle to say, like, this can turn into this. It's kind of like Pokemon evolutions or like old Chinese elements where one element becomes the next in an ongoing circle. So today I thought we would talk about how you would do that, because in our Analytics for Marketers Slack group, a number of our members responded to say, like, yeah, they typically start with a newsletter and have to turn it into content from there.
And so I just want to make sure, in addition to how we repurpose the content, we make sure we're talking about optimizing the content as well. Because we know from last week's episode, which if you missed it, you can find on our YouTube channel, trustinsights.ai/YouTube, go to the So What playlist. The way that generative AI consumes content is different from how a search engine like Google or Bing is consuming content.
Exactly right. In general, you want your content to be semantically rich, meaning that it covers a topic thoroughly. And to a degree, you would want that for humans as well, but it can occasionally get overwhelming for humans. If you say like, hey, take this 300-word blog post and make it 20,000 words. Like, yeah, I don't want to read that. But you also want to make sure that it is covering as many aspects of the topic as you possibly can within reason on a blog post. As an example, you might say like, what else could be done with this? So should we dig into our first demo?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's light it up, as Guy Fieri would say.
Bam. I know, different Jeff. Let's start with something as simple as like a services page on our website. What could we do to not only expand this or change formats, but also make it richer? Well, one of the things we could do is we could say, this is a good page. The intent of this page is to get a person to want to hire us. How could we use AI to do that better? So the first thing that we'd want to do is we'd want to get the content of the page itself. So we'll take this content here. We're going to put it inside of a prompt. And the prompt we're going to put it inside of is going to be very, very straightforward. We're going to say, let's figure out what questions our ideal customer profile would have. So we'll need an ideal customer profile, which we have one for Trust Insights. I'm going to go into Google's AI Studio. You can use the AI of your choice. It is not dependent on using this particular one. If you use ChatGPT, that's fine. If you use Claude, that's fine. And I'm going to start off by saying, you are a CMI content marketing expert with a specialty in content creation, content generation, content repurposing. Using our best practices guide and our ideal customer profile, anticipate 5 follow-up questions that our ICP would ask us after reading the provided content. I should change that to read the content. Order them by probability, most probable to least probable. Provide the question, the explanation, and the probability expressed as a percentage. So this is part of the prompt. We're going to put this in. We're going to bring in, just at the bottom here, the Trust Insights ideal customer profile, because we want to have that in here. And let's see if, yes, my content marketing best practices guide is also available. This is an evolution of the Rappel framework. So if you're not familiar, go to trustinsights.ai/Rappel for our Rappel prompting framework. What's different now, process-wise, but the same conceptually, is that instead of asking the model, what do you know about this topic? We use a tool like Gemini Deep Research to say, what do you know about this particular topic? In this case, content repurposing or content marketing. Build a guide, and it comes up with now a 21-page guide. And we're going to add that in as one of the ingredients to this as well. So we have our ICP, we have our original content, we have our guide, and we have our prompt. Let's see what 5 questions, and just to make sure, I'm going to copy and paste the prompt at the very end. The reason I'm doing this is because we've got a lot of content here. We want to make sure that the model does not forget what it's supposed to be doing. Many AI models with very long prompts, it's a good idea to put the prompt at the beginning and end. It actually helps. There's a prompt engineering technique called RE2 that essentially says just repeat yourself.
And so one of the steps that we didn't cover, but we've covered in previous shows, or you can reach out to us if you are interested in learning how to build your own, is the ideal customer profile. So again, you can catch that episode on our YouTube channel. And if you want help constructing one, just reach out to us. But the ideal customer profile essentially covers deeper insights than a typical persona. It gets into pain points, buying behaviors, what keeps them up at night, how they make decisions, that kind of thing.
So here are 5 follow-up questions. For the digital customer journey analysis, can you tell me more about the specific digital marketing channels your machine learning model covers? We use a wide range of platforms, and I want to ensure it's relevant to our mix. So that's something that on our page, we might want to add more information about that. Regarding marketing mix modeling, can you give me examples of the types of marketing channels and tactics your model can analyze? We're trying to optimize a budget allocation. Again, now this is for a sales landing page. So these are all things that we would definitely want to do. We could also go over to our blog. Let's take just a blog post of ours. Here's a recent one that Kelsey has put up on the site. And this is, Katie, from something that you wrote at one point. And we're going to take this content and I'm going to put it essentially right back into the same prompt. So if I go to my storage locker here, let's go and put this in. And now we'll have it ask the same 5 questions of this blog post. Say, what would our ICP ask Katie after reading this post? It says, you mentioned this. Could you elaborate how to practically apply the platform aspect? What were your recommended platforms for showcasing these human-centered testimonials? You emphasize preserving authentic language, including context. What are some practical guidelines for editing testimonials for clarity without losing authenticity? You advocate for testimonials as AI proof. What are some best practices for actually creating effective video testimonials? And so on and so forth. So what we're doing here is we're taking a really good piece that Katie already wrote and saying, well, what else would our ICP care about that we could add more content to this?
Got it. Because if I'm following correctly, so we've started with the human audience version of the content. And now in order for it to appeal to generative AI models, there needs to be a lot more content. So we need to expand upon the content in a way that isn't just, dumping keywords into it, but really done in a thoughtful way, very similar to the way that, Google's search algorithm at one point was looking for content. It has to be helpful. It has to answer questions. It can't just be word vomit, but it actually has to be useful to someone. AI systems, AI models are looking for that as well. And if we know that there's going to be a public version of this content, we should probably still consider the human audience, make sure that it's, maybe it's a frequently asked questions, maybe it's expanding upon a certain landing page or whatever it is, but we still need to make sure that we're sort of balancing the two. And I think that's where it's going to get tricky for people.
Exactly right. Which brings us to, nice segue, Katie, how to do those frequently asked questions. One of the most straightforward tools to do this is Google's Notebook LM. Notebook LM, as many folks are familiar with because everyone and their cousin uses it to make audio overviews, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm going to take our content here. I'm going to save this as a PDF, which this is just this article that Katie wrote. I'm going to put this into Notebook LM. Let's see if it's saved in a location that was intelligent. Where did you go? Yes, there it is. So I'll plop our PDF in. And once it's finished loading and it reads through Katie's writing, you'll see there's little chiclets alongside here. The study guide, the frequently asked questions, the briefing document. It did not enjoy that. All right, let's do a text-only version of it then by saying cut, paste, Katie article. And remove the download it did not like. Remove that source and add in just the plain text version. It appreciated that much more.
Well, good. I like that it has like the shouting emoji as well.
Exactly. So one of the things that Notebook LM has built in, because it's intended as a study tool, is the ability to generate automated cards, things like timelines or briefing documents or study guides or frequently asked questions. And so in here, we have the frequently asked questions that where it took this and it spit out. Essentially, here's the frequently asked questions of this article. So I could take this verbatim and literally just glue it to the end of the post, and as a way of having machines look at those questions and say, yeah, this reiterates what's in the content. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to increase the number of relevant tokens, aka keywords, that a machine would see when consuming the article as a whole. So if I glue on this extra 7 questions, I'm basically restating the article.
Mm-hmm. Which is really what frequently asked questions are. It's information that is already available, but for some reason, people can't find it. So if you stick it in an FAQs, like, oh, that's the thing I was looking for.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So you stick that in there, and that would work. Now, here's something else that you could do with this. If you wanted to get fancy, you could take this frequently asked questions and put it in a tool, for example, like 11 Labs, which is a text-to-speech voice interface, or you could do it in Google's text-to-speech or any platform that can read things aloud. And you could create an audio version just of the frequently asked questions. And just by having that content of having this discussion, you would have a podcast, right? So you could take that text and turn it into into audio. Now, you might not want to have it written exactly like that. That's kind of awkward, right? Just to have it say, just read this list of questions and answers aloud. What you could do, though, is you could hand that back to Gemini. Let's start a new prompt here and say, convert this content into a speaking script for a narrator to read aloud in the style of an educational video. Restructure it so that it has a narrative flow that's easy for a listener to follow along with without needing to read it. And what it's going to do is come up with essentially the same information, but a little easier. The narrator: in today's digital world, we're surrounded by information, marketing messages, product descriptions, even reviews. It's everywhere online, and so on and so forth. Or we could use the original blog post as well, or a combination of the two to have them merge together. But what you see here is we now have essentially a voiceover script. And this voiceover script can be handed to a tool like I mentioned, 11 Labs, that could process this and turn it into audio.
Interesting.
So let's go ahead and take this. I'm going to copy let's copy the markdown because I see some interesting stuff in there. In this script, there's a lot of sort of these cues, and I don't really want a service reading those aloud because that's not going to help. So we're going to get rid of those. And now that we have this here, we don't need to have it declare every line the narrator says this. So we're going to just copy and remove that as well, so that it's nice. It's a nice clean script. This is pretty decent. Let's remove the markdown asterisks. We don't need those. That just confuses text-to-speech models. And we are at 7,000 characters. Now, if we go, let's go to, who do we want to use? Do we want to use 11 Labs? Do you have a preference as to the kind of voice you want to have this read aloud by, Katie?
Not really. I mean, I'll be honest. Sorry, go ahead, John.
I just said Morgan Freeman. That's
well, sure.
I don't have Morgan Freeman. I could do Casey Kasem.
No. I don't know a lot about the different voice platforms. If you want to do like a very quick run through of them, like I don't really know what my options are.
So there's a lot of text-to-speech platforms. There are platforms that are built into your computer. So Mac OS has built-in voices that can read aloud content. They sound fairly robotic. You can definitely tell that without a shadow of a doubt, they are completely machine-generated. There are platforms like 11 Labs. This is one of many that they're pretty good. What makes them nice is that they are very, very user friendly. A user can just copy and paste text into them and be off and running, and it is very, very simple to use. However, they're not the most natural sounding because there's no way to provide things like inflection and stuff. The model's going to guess at how a piece of text should be read aloud. Or another option would be Google has its own text-to-speech library. And Google's is a lot more complicated to use because you have to use it through its API. However, it sounds the most natural. It sounds incredible when you listen to it. And so let's go ahead and have 11 Labs generate this speech. Rachel is coming out to come and chat about this. I can't pipe the audio, I don't think, from here to there. So we'll have to put the audio samples in Analytics for Marketers. But we can come up with a few different options for how this would sound. But once you've got this audio, then you can put it up as a podcast. And I could even take your voice, Katie, with your permission, and put it in to have a version of you read this aloud.
If this was something we were going to do more consistently, I would probably opt for that so that it was me versus some generic Rachel person. Not to derail this conversation, but with these text to speech tools, like what are you able to choose? So you said it doesn't do like inflection and that kind of thing, but can you choose different accents? So for example, does it always default to the generic flat American accent, or can you actually do something that isn't necessarily, like, not that I would want this because it's going to make me sound unintelligent, but could I do a Boston accent, having chosen it without having to program something in? Like, is that one of the options?
If you had the audio, the training data with the Boston accent, yes, you could. It has to be in the data that you give it. So I just regenerated this with my my friend Ruby's voice. She's English. You've met her at Marketing AI conference, Katie. She has a Southern England voice, and so it will read this in her accent. So if we had Southie Katie on record, then yes, it absolutely could.
Not going to happen. But good to know. No, but we do enough audio and video that you have enough samples of my voice. So if it were going to do text to speech of something that I've written, I personally would want it done in my voice versus some other, voice or other accent or something along those lines. So that's something that I would need to think about when I'm putting together my content strategy of, is text to speech part of that? Who's going to be representing the stuff that I write? Is it going to be me? Is it going to be someone else? Because if people are watching me on a video or listening to me on a podcast, and then this pops up with a completely different voice, that could be confusing for my personal brand or the company's brand. So those are just like things that we want to, consider longer term as we're playing with these tools. I mean, John Wall, you're the voice of Marketing Over Coffee. Suddenly, if someone else is reading all of the frequently asked questions about Marketing Over Coffee, I could see how for your audience that might be a little jarring.
Yeah, the whole soundscape is a big part of when you get to professional level stuff, you have to spend a lot of time working on that. So picking the right voice it's a critical thing. Although I still would love to have Southie Katie do some of our stuff. I think that would resonate.
All right, we'll see what we can do.
I was able to get the voice loaded. Let's see if we can play this and see how it sounds.
In today's digital world, we're surrounded by information. Marketing messages, product descriptions, even reviews. It's everywhere online. But as artificial intelligence becomes more and more sophisticated, blurring the lines between what's real and what's generated, something truly valuable is rising to the surface. Genuine human connection.
So that's the generated audio from from 11 Labs. And 11 Labs, the user interface permits you 5,000 characters. If you use the API, which requires a bigger technical lift, that can be essentially as much data as you can pay for.
It's always whatever you can afford, isn't it?
Exactly. The other thing that with 11 Labs, which is a good thing, is that if you put in a sampled voice, the human being has to authenticate it live. Like they have to go into the little setup wizard and say, yes, this is really me. Here's a picture of me. Here's me. And they turn on the video, and you have to speak aloud so that it matches the voice, the recordings with you, so that people can't be doing deep fakes of you without your permission.
I do like that. I do like that.
Mm-hmm. So that takes text. So we've gone from a blog post to an enhanced blog post to a frequently asked questions to a speaking script, and now turn that into a podcast. Our next stop on our journey would be to go to a tool that to turn into video. So one of the easiest ones to use is a tool called Headliner. Headliner allows you to create what's called an audiogram. So I'm going to choose this audiogram here, and we will take we're going to take just a specific piece of audio. I'm going to upload it, and I'm going to upload the just the audio. I don't want a transcript. And let's load up a template. And I always like this one here. Let's change the text to to human testimonials.
Well, this question came about a few weeks ago when we were talking about different channels that, people should be on. And one of the things that came up, and John, I think you've asked this question before, is what do I post on YouTube? What if I don't create a lot of video? And I think that's one of the misconceptions about YouTube as a channel. Yes, it's a video channel, but you don't have to sit in front of a camera and record hours and hours of video in order to have content to post on a channel like YouTube. And I think this is a great example of, if you're not recording yourself, what else can you create that you can then put up and create a YouTube channel? Oh, good. It should be ready by 1:42. That's helpful.
Exactly. This is one of many options. So you could, if you wanted to, it looks a little uncanny valley. You can take sampled video of yourself, and using a tool like HeyGen, load that in and train a video avatar that will speak like you. And for anybody who knows you, they'll go, that's not real, because it will not capture your mannerisms all that correctly, particularly if you're like me and you move around a lot in a video frame. It will do some very strange things. But if you are stock still, you can persuade yourself to sit perfectly still for 2 minutes and read aloud a script. It will do a decent job of simulating you. Then you could hand the script to that and have HeyGen generate the video of you speaking it aloud.
I think that's a good option for you, John. You don't record a lot of video of yourself.
Yeah, only if I could get a Max Headroom skin to put on top of it. That would be good. I would have to have a slightly fake video guy.
Well, I was going to say, don't forget to blink during your sample.
Yeah, right. It's creepy after a while.
There's also tools like Kling and Halo and Huanyan and a bunch of different Chinese models that allow you to do very similar things, or to just create video in general. There are tools like Storybook.io or Vizsla, where you give it a script and it assembles a video using stock footage. And then if you pay for it, then it authorizes the construction of the video. So if we go to, I believe it's Storybook.io. Nope, that's not it. Storybook AI. There we go. The AI-powered story generator. You can give it a script, and it will just make video. It can assemble video from stock footage, and it looks kind of like an infomercial. Like if you're insufficiently specific in the script and the prompt, it can definitely have that sort of late night cable TV look. But to what you were saying earlier, Katie, if you just don't want to be on screen, it's a valid option.
Mm-hmm. And these tools are, fairly new. I remember a while back we had a client and all we had for them were static images. And they kept saying, we want to see video, but they weren't providing video. We didn't have a way to capture video. And these tools at the time just were not readily available. And now, especially for social media platforms, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, ones that are more video forward, where you'd want to have something more engaging, it is going to be easier if you have a bunch of static images to stitch them together to make a video. Let's say you don't have images, you have a PowerPoint presentation, or you have a bunch of charts and graphs. You can do the same thing. These apps are going to help you put something together that you can use as a stand-in for shooting a lot of video.
Exactly. Another thing that you should be thinking about is, in addition to extending your content and to making it work well, first things first, you want to make sure and we talked about this last week, you should be using well-structured content. So if, for example, in this issue of the newsletter, you can see they were using heading 2, heading 3. We're using HTML-based syntax that will correctly show up even without the style sheet. Like, this is what it looks like without our style sheets, so that it's clear to a machine what the layout is in here. Every image, for example, should have alt text so that we know what the image is, because that helps machines to understand things as well. And then from here, one of the things that you might want to do is you might want to take this kind of text and translate it into other languages. So, for example, let me go into AI Studio. I'll give it a prompt, and I'm going to say, I want you to turn this newsletter, which is in HTML format, and I want you to convert it into Mandarin Chinese. And so it will correctly preserve the HTML structures and URLs and things, but it will keep the rest of the content in Mandarin Chinese. And then you could put this up as a separate post on your website, and having that content in a different language might be useful. Yes, Katie.
How do you know it's correct? And the reason I ask this, I will tell you a very brief anecdote. When I was working on substance abuse intake tools, developing them for clinicians, the versions we had were English, Spanish, and Mandarin and Cantonese. Nobody, literally nobody, I don't know why we chose that, on my team spoke either Mandarin or Cantonese. And once we actually hired a proper translator, we found out that some of the things that we thought were translated correctly were actually translated very not safe for work. Find me in Analytics for Marketers if you want to know what specifically that was. So how do you know? So I don't speak Cantonese. How do I know that this is correct?
So the best practice is have a native language speaker review it. That is the best practice. If you do not have that, then feed it into a different language model that is perhaps not the one you use, and review the translation. So, for example, if folks may have heard of DeepL. DeepL is a professional translation tool that does a very, very, very good job. So I can take the output from Gemini and essentially read through it and see, did it do something like completely and totally horribly wrong? And in this case, it seems to have done a very, very good job of it. In a good chunk of that is because Katie, our newsletter is written to be, doesn't have like a lot of weird contortions in language. It's very straightforward. If you were doing this with things like fiction, where you had very specific narrative turns of phrase, that
Slang.
it might fall down. But for in our case, business content, if you look at this, in this episode of In Your Insights, the Trust Institute podcast, Katie and Chris discuss optimizing your content strategy for the age of artificial intelligence. This is almost perfectly correct, right? There's a slight variance from the original, but it is not enough that anyone would go, I don't understand what this means, or wow, that's offensive.
I would make a recommendation, just a quick plug, to make a data-driven decision. Because yes, you can translate into the language that your little heart desires. But because there are so many different options, I would recommend going into your web analytics system, like a Google Analytics 4, and seeing where your traffic is coming from geographically so that you can start to narrow down, does it make sense to translate this into Cantonese? Are we getting a lot of traffic from a geographic area that speaks Cantonese? Chris has this exact analysis pulled up: English, Spanish, Indonesian, Korean, Chinese, Arabic, French, German. So I would look at this and go, so obviously things need to be in English. They also probably need to be grammatically correct. So that's on us. But then also, now Spanish is an interesting one. Having done translations in Spanish, there's a lot of different kinds of Spanish. And so we would need to narrow that down even further. The same with each of these. There tends to be more than one way to speak the language. Therefore, this is a good start. And if we suddenly saw a huge spike in Spanish, we would then want to drill down into what region so that we could get the correct version of Spanish.
Mm-hmm. The one thing that I will say here is it is a good idea for anyone who wants to influence AI. I mean, this is now specifically about AI, to have a Chinese language version, because some of the best AI models in the world are coming out of China. If you have content in both English and Chinese, you're basically doubling your coverage. And as their scrapers go out on the web, their tools, for obvious reasons, prefer Chinese language content. So if you got both, when someone queries these language models, the tokens associated inside, because Chinese is broken down into tokens just like English is, you're essentially increasing the token count for relevance around your brand name. So it is a good idea, assuming that you follow the recommendations Katie laid out here to make sure that you're doing it safely, to have Chinese language content, regardless of the number of human beings who come to your website, because we are trying to influence DeepSeek and Alibaba's Qwen and QWQ and Baidu's Ernie, to a lesser degree, models like Exo1, all these Far Eastern state-of-the-art models. We want to be speaking in their language as well as our own.
So, John, how soon can we expect the multilingual versions of Marketing Over Coffee?
Right, in every language running. That would be one thing that we would put up there, but I'm still struggling with the video. We've got video going up now. I'm at least getting ahead of that. But yeah, international is at the top. The one good thing though is we do have the language breakdowns. Like I do know the 10 languages we would start with, so at least have that going for me. But yeah, not there yet.
Yep. So to recap, number one, you should be using generative AI to extend your content, whatever form it's in. What are the 5 questions your ideal customer is going to ask of any piece of content? Build that. And if you are clever, you might have a Claude project or a GPT or a Gemini Gem with your writing style and with your background knowledge. And with the article, you can have it infer a first draft of the extended version of the content. Second, use Notebook LM to generate things like frequently asked questions. Then use the model of your choice to extend that even further. Convert things into scripts that can be read aloud by text-to-speech tools so that you can have an audio version of a piece of text content. Because one of the things that I found personally is that about 30% of your audience would like to listen to your content. And if you make it easy, it also allows you to be in Spotify. It also allows you to be in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and so on and so forth. From there, use any of the popular AI tools to turn your audio into video. Now you have content for YouTube and Wistia, and depending on the length, LinkedIn. You could use a tool like Opus Clips to then take that long version, split it into short versions, and now you have Instagram Reels and Facebook Reels and TikToks and things. And then finally, take all of this in the language that you're used to and use the tools to follow the same process within languages that maybe you aren't as fluent in, or that you don't necessarily speak, but you have the tools to fact check and generate, so that you could take one piece of content, one video, one newsletter, and potentially have 50 or 60 pieces of content come out of it.
I like it. So it sounds like a lot of work, but like anything, if you build a process around it, perhaps even use something like the 5P framework to get yourself organized, you can do your purpose, people, process, platform, performance. Then it just sort of becomes part of your everyday, every week, every month as you're creating content. Like, okay, I'm going to write the newsletter, but while I'm writing the newsletter, I'm going to also give it to this system and then give it to this system and then do this. And it just becomes part of what you do all the time. I already have some thoughts about some hopefully easy wins we can do with our own newsletter that we should have probably been doing all along.
Exactly. That's going to do it for this week's show. Next time, we'll cover part 3, which is off-site, what you should be doing outside of your own website for AI optimization. So we will talk to you on the next one. Take care. Thanks for watching today. Be sure to subscribe to our show wherever you're watching it. For more resources and to learn more, check out the Trust Insights podcast at trustinsights.ai/TI podcast and a weekly email newsletter at trustinsights.ai/newsletter. Got questions about what you saw in today's episode? Join our free Analytics for Marketers Slack group at trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers. See you next time.